what are one of your barriers? I want to keep feeding you business, as long as you're wanting it. But what are some barriers in your day-to-day routine? You're like, man, if you could fix these 3 bottlenecks, I could take on more clients. But otherwise I'm kind of tapped out, So I'm trying to be mindful to ask that question that I needed asked of me, and solved of me.
Welcome back to the TrustBuilt Podcast. I am your host, Alan Bennett, and today we have a guest named Dustin Murphy from Pitch Retail. Welcome to the show, Dustin.
Nice to be on.
So I've got a question that I know people are going to go, wait a minute, Pitch Retail? What's that? So if you don't mind, take a few minutes and talk a little bit about what Pitch Retail, where that name came from and what it is that you do.
Absolutely. So we're based in Northwest Arkansas, and as people may or may not know, Walmart is based here, and there's sort of an ecosystem around the servicing of Walmart. And so Pitch Retail, what we do is, there are different interchangeable words. Some say broker, some say rep, manufacturer's rep, sales rep. We like to sort of consider ourselves national account management. So we're focused on Walmart, Walmart.com, Sam's Club, Sam'sClub.com. And, for companies that don't want to go full in, hey, we just want to go put an office in Bentonville and put humans in there. They want to work their way towards that, or that's just not the business model they work on. They like commissioned sales reps. Then they would look for a company like ours to manage their Walmart business.
Okay, so a company like that, I've heard of, people that do that type of work. That's not something that you just wake up one morning and go, you know what? I think I'm going to set people up with Walmart. You have to be connected to Walmart. You have to know how to make that introduction, right? So is that part of your background?
Oh, absolutely. So I am the oddball of the family. Everyone else in my family worked at Walmart.
Now I know why we get along so well.
I did intern at Walmart, but no, I come from a family of Walmart operators, primarily out in the field, store managers, department manager, market manager. That's what I grew up with. We would do our holidays around Walmart calendars, holidays at Walmart when you're in any sort of retail, that's the biggest time of the year. So my family didn't exactly get to just take off on those hectic, weeks leading up to the holidays. Sitting around the table, it was conversations about in stock and shrink. And I remember don't call your brother. He's got inventory on Thursday. So it's sort of like we all, waited for that number that he would get the phone call. Anyone from Walmart's going to hear this and be like, yeah, I know what he's talking about. But if you're not, it won't make any sense. But built around retail. I did my internship at Walmart in hunting apparel. The beauty of going into these large organizations, especially like Walmart, they cover so many departments. I'd never shot a gun a day in my life, and you sort of just get placed in an area. So I ended up in hunting apparel and got to learn all about that industry. Did get to shoot a gun for the first time, so got to learn about hunting and the hunting culture, and gained an appreciation for that. But they may move you to sewing right after that, so they move people around. But mine was just a summer internship, and that's where I started. So that's how I kind of got into the space, and then it kept going from there.
So Walmart is only one organization, or what I'm going to say an organization, one of the larger organizations that you've worked with. Obviously, it's hard to be larger than Walmart, but there's other large organizations that you've kind of cut your teeth with, right?
Yeah. So my first job out of college, I went to work for Rubbermaid. They had a big post-college hiring spree at the time. It was called the Phoenix program. And there were a lot of, hundreds of us fresh out of college. They moved me to Houston, Texas, and I, worked in Walmart stores on the Rubbermaid products that were in that store. Then I moved back here to Northwest Arkansas. I took a job with PepsiCo, worked on their Gatorade business, and then started calling on field sales, sort of the Walmart regionals and divisional vice presidents out in the field on that same Gatorade, Tropicana, Quaker business. I then left PepsiCo and went to Disney, and that got me into the video game business. So Gatorade, then, Tropicana orange juice, and then into video games. I'd had some experience with the movie world and then also publishing, but primarily a lot of video game business. And then, I always say, the pixie dust wore off, and I had a person in my network reach out. They were wanting to start a rep firm, and it was sort of like a I'll go if you go thing. And then we went out and got into what's sort of, the space that I'm in now. That was a previous company, M Squared. I did many years with them under Mike Markey. He was amazing, taught me everything, and also just really set me up for success to move into pitch retail. And that's where we are today with 4 employees.
Well, this is a conversation I love to have. And I've asked this before of other guests on previous podcasts, that jump from working in the corporate world to being an entrepreneur. That transition is a big deal, right? So walk the audience through what that's like, what the world was like for you, making that transition, because you're going from a safe space, corporate, health insurance, all these benefits that you've got as a corporate employee, to now all of a sudden it's all on you, right?
Yeah, so you're right. Corporate America, in my experience, I think on paper, those are just big brands, right? So I learned so much. That's a separate podcast entirely. Like, what did you learn at these massive organizations? But it did give me the foundation, like I couldn't step out because relationships aren't good enough to get you, with Walmart. Those are the big leagues. And so I did learn just so much about retail. Again, I had the sort of family store level, customer focused thing, and then sort of the corporate, supplier buyer relationship that gave that foundation. But then when the time was right, I think for a lot of entrepreneurs or people that make that jump, you're ready for a change, and I think, that's where I was at that point. And, a lot of other factors contributed to it. Layoffs started to become a thing. I think as we all talk about, everybody's heard someone in their family, with the like, boy, people just don't work for 30 years at the same job anymore. I'm like, yeah, that is definitely a true. And, the layoffs were sort of coming through, and I've always compared it to being on Interstate 49, here in Northwest Arkansas with our growing population. We're blessed with one interstate, and I've always said, if you're on that interstate, you're going to get rear-ended. It's coming. Like, no matter what, if you spend enough time out there, your day is going to get covered, your number's going to get called. And that's sort of happened with corporate America now. At some point, someone's going to tap on your door and they're going to be like, hey, I need to talk to you, and then it's not performance-based. We've decided to go a different direction. And that's just sort of business right now. And I think for me, sort of watching this happen to just so many great individuals, and they were probably not performance related. Business just changes. And I just was like, well, if this is going to happen to me, I'd like to get ahead of it. And so in addition to just wanting to go my own direction, having young children at home at the time, I just said, I think if I'm going to fail, I want it to be on me. I want to have responsibility for that. And if I win, I want that to be on me. And so that sort of started that process to migrate away, take the risk, and go out and work with Mike and be in an independent space.
It's interesting. You just shared a story of exit planning, planning your own exit. Yeah. And that's the world I live in. So my day job is not podcasting. I enjoy this as fun. I like having these types of conversations. But my day job is I'm an exit planner, and I help business owners increase the value so that whenever they decide to sell the business or transition out, that they've got a successful, valuable business to transition out of. And they're like, well, I'm not ready to sell yet, or I'm not ready to turn it over to my kids, that type of talk. I'm like, well, you're leaving, whether vertically or horizontally, you're leaving, and you just described an exit process. You decided to take control of your own career and exit vertically out
Correct.
Of that world. Yeah, so now that you're doing what you're doing, let's take us to the time like now it started. pitch retail is happening. I've got to do something with this. Mm-hmm. Talk about that transition period. I don't know how long of a time period this is for you, but that transition, like, okay, now I've got to get some clients, or I've got to build a team, or I've got to, what does that look like in that time frame?
Yeah, I mean, I think first off, I have to give, thanks and credit where it's due. Again, back to Mike at M Squared. He was nearing retirement age. I'll say Mike is young at heart. I don't know that he's ever going to be retired, but he was nearing the point in which he was ready to maybe not do the full ownership of M Squared. And, I approached him and I said, I'd like to buy the Walmart side of the business from you. The way we worked, he sort of was in Dallas and managed GameStop. I managed the Walmart side of the business. And we started to work through the plans of what that could be. So it was an owner finance deal. I had to go to a bank to get a portion of the upfront money. Not a lot of banks like to give you money when you have no assets other than a MacBook, right? Like when you're in sort of the knowledge worker space, a lot of times I'm not sitting on a lot of things. I have no tractors to loan against. So Simmons Bank, Jacob Sibley over there, they had a great sort of community development arm, and they sort of looked at my business plan. They looked at the historical performance of M Squared and sort of just saying like, okay, so you're going to basically be doing what you've been doing for the last 8 years, but you're going to be in charge. I'm like, that's exactly it. So I think it just took a lot of things, Mike being willing to owner finance that, a big portion of that, and then the bank being able to look at this and say, this is not the riskiest thing we're doing, in banking, and put some money up to make that transition. I know that's a little in the weeds, but I know some listeners this is a business and entrepreneurial minded podcast. I'm trying to share at least components of, respectfully, share components of that transition. So, we had one employee, Brad, he came with us when I kind of talked to him like, hey, so this is going to happen. Are you comfortable? And he's like, I'm all in. Let's do this thing, So that happened. A lot of the clients, because it was such a partnership of a transition with Mike, it wasn't animosity or a parting of ways or I'm going to go do my thing. It was very much, amicable. I still talk to him frequently. So because of that, the clients also, I think, felt that. And so all of the clients that I had on Walmart came with me. So I got very fortunate that I got to start day one with active clients. And I had a great person on my team that was coming into his own right, and his own abilities of managing clients. And then we brought in another person, Alexandria. We've then continued to just add people, Patrick Bowman, the name we just referenced earlier. So we just keep growing and growing. And, back to you talked about sort of entrepreneurship and some of your previous roles, like that's very much where I'm in, as I'm going into strategy, understanding like, okay, now that I know I can pay rent, now that I'm feeling confident about the business, how can I pause and actually reflect back on what is a 3-year strategy? What should our comp plans look like? Things that sound very straightforward, but I think anyone that has started a business knows a lot of times you're assembling the plane in midair. So that's sort of where we're at. I think we're on the other side of that. We are, there's revenue, there's profit there, but it's just, how do you turn it more from 3 people having a good time to getting a little more structure, which I think can be tricky because, you just listed off the companies that I used to work for. You may have experience too. A lot of entrepreneurs, like, they want to run from that. Like, I hate personal evals every year, Screw you, corporate America. We're going to have no evals, right? We're going to just do the opposite. And, that can kind of work when there's 2 of you. But then as you build, you're like, well, turns out people like feedback, So we're working on, bringing in that structure back into the organization.
Let's take a step back in your partnership. Mm-hmm. A lot of entrepreneurs start out with partners, and sometimes they go great. In your situation, sounds like it was a good partnership, and a lot of times they don't. So I knew I would smell blood in the water around trust. So partnerships, it's a relationship based on trust. And it sounds like it was part mentorship and part true business partnership. So talk a little bit about your relationship, why you think it was amicable, how did that flow smoothly in your opinion? Share with the audience what partnerships and a good partnership is built on.
Yeah, I'll speak slightly backwards and then a little bit to the current experience as well. When we started the previous rep firm, when Mike started that, there was 5 hours between us. So by default, there's a little bit of like, I'm this guy working 5 hours away. How does Mike know that I'm doing things? So I think there was a leap of faith to an extent on his part that obviously I can't talk to. But I think for me, and it was a learning curve, I just was like, oh, we're small and we're loose and I can just show up to that trade show. It's fine. I'll get there when I want. We had an instance pretty early on where he's like, hey, where are you? I don't know your travel plans, and I'm just like, well, I said I was going to be there. Why did you need to know? I'm like, why are you micromanaging me? And that's some immaturity as well on my part. But just looking back, I'm like, yeah, because he didn't know anything. I'm 5 hours away from him. That's just that continued communication. I think time and communication and it just worked, and he was just like, hey, I just would like to know, we're a team. I like being around you. We have fun together. We're here to go gain clients. Like, just work with me a little bit. And I think it was just that, not an attacking tone. It was just very conversational and friendly. And again, there's a reason we're still friends, and that was built over the years that we worked together.
So you knew how to communicate with each other, or at least it was very comfortable to communicate with each other.
Yeah.
Right. In relationships, whether it's, with like me and my wife or my friends or people that I've worked with, knowing how to speak the other person's language in a way that they can hear it is an important part. And that's what it sounds like Mike did. He was breaking down that barrier going, hey, here's how we can communicate. And you were receptive to that.
Yeah. And a little bit of, to be honest, so much just maturity. I think, you look back and I think all of us, when you're in your late 20s, early 30s, mid 20s, you're like, I'm pretty amazing at what I do. Like I was really more like, just get out of my way. And I think, again, also maybe the same thing, entrepreneurship. Like, I don't want to report to people. I don't want to have to turn in quarterly things. I didn't want to do the minutia, right? Just get out of my way, give me my target, let me go sell. Like, let me go do the thing. And then get some experience, get a little time. And you're like, no, it's not just you. It is the team. It is communication and relationships. And so, he was able to sort of have patience as I grew as an individual and kind of being out here with no, no management, no watching me on the day to day. So, took some patience on his part, but, and just some maturing and growing that I think just naturally occurs for a lot of us.
Yeah. As you grew, as you went, let's fast forward back up to the split, right? He's going to do the GameStop, you're going to do Walmart. And so that's when you're truly out on your own then, right? That's
for the most part on the
employee.
day-to-day. He came quite a while later.
Okay.
But yeah, for the day-to-day, for sure. It was me, Walmart, him, GameStop, and the daily duties, the daily tasks of what those of us in the supplier community do, just to sort of maintenance and take care of Walmart and the supplier. That was all me on Walmart. Yeah.
So there's got to come a time that I'm assuming, right? Tom, I'm assuming, making assumptions here. The mind has to shift. Like, we're operating at this level and I need to be a little bit higher up, or I need to go to the next level or phase 2 or 3 or, the next step, the next stage of your business life, your company's life. What does that look like? How does that work for you?
Yeah. So it started in the previous job and it's continued to sort of carry over. I just really felt like there's a lot of opportunity. I'm just watching everything that Walmart's going through, thinking about all the connections we're making, the growth that we're having, a lot of word of mouth referrals. And, I've heard the phrase recently, Ryan Dice is a guy that I've been following. Do you have a demand constraint or supply constraint? And I'm like, we didn't have a demand, but at the same time, Mike was bringing new lines to me and I'm like waving the white flag. I'm like, I can't do it. It's not because we don't have more business coming in. There's just one of me. And so then you start, that's like the first thing of like, okay, well now we're starting to turn into a real company, not just two guys selling video games, And so it's like, hey, if I could get some support, I think we can keep growing. And that's when we brought on Brad, and he's been amazing. And he's now very successful running a lot of his own lines. But it took, is that like just the constant waving white flag for many months, I was saying like, I need help. And so now when I look at our team, that's one of the questions, like, what are one of your barriers? I want to keep feeding you business, as long as you're wanting it. But what are some barriers in your day-to-day routine? We're like, man, if you could fix these 3 bottlenecks, I could take on more clients. But otherwise I'm kind of tapped out, So I'm trying to be mindful to ask that question that I needed asked of me, and solved of me.
Yeah. A lot of entrepreneurs that I run into, they're different behavioral styles, but a common one is they're the doers, right? Like, this is what we're going to do. They have a list of 10 things, and by gosh, I'm going to finish them all by 11 a.m. kind of. So they have this sense of urgency a lot do. They like to problem solve, and they like to accomplish. In their mind, it's like winning, right? I did it. That get that warm fuzzy, the dopamine of checking off the task. As you and your team grow, how do you wrangle that? If you've got a lot of people that let's say a lot, whatever you've got working with you, everybody's that way. Somebody's got to identify the ditches. Where are the ditches? How do we stay on the rails, so to speak, as you're surging forward and accomplishing things? What does that look like so that you don't get over your skis, so to speak?
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you asked that. And I think, to be candid, that's the middle of the process we're in right now, is going back and evaluating. Because I think what you do get, if you're in tune with your people and you're spending time, you can sort of look at their faces and you're like, everyone's maxed out. I'm feeling it. I'm feeling that. So then it is a pause and like spending time to take a look at our process. I mean, I just ripped about 60 Post-it notes off my desk where I'm mapping out our process, and sort of identifying, what are the key areas that we can't screw up on? What are areas that maybe we could outsource? What are areas we could automate? What can we fix? And I think that's the dialogue that we're doing right now. We've got an offsite planned. We're going through these exercises as we speak. And it's pretty exciting. I think for me, back to your initial point of like wanting to cross off the list, I mean, that's been really hard for me. And I think they would also say it's been hard for me to kind of just shut up sometimes, like get out of higher performers' way and let them do their job. But for so long when it is you, or it's you and another person, or the duties are spread pretty equally. So it's like, yes, I'm the owner and I'm doing QuickBooks, but I'm also still the day-to-day account manager of client A, B, and C. I'm still very much in it. And so as we've continued to bring on people and they take on those clients, I'm getting that fresh air to just pause and sort of do the work on myself from a managerial and owner standpoint to learn, of like, nobody teaches you cash flow management ever. I mean, it's just, you just sort of have to go through it, and I think kind of got that part more dialed in, and management and empathy, I mean, if you're a hard driving salesperson, a lot of times empathy is not your strongest suit. So at least as it relates to managing, other employees and people in your organization. So just working through all of that.
One of my favorite conversations to have with clients is around Pareto's law, the 80-20 rule. And the people that are the doers, they'll hit those 20%, meaning, so for those that aren't familiar with Pareto's law, it's, you take, what is the 80% and don't really contribute like the top 20%. So how do I devote 80% of my time onto the 20% that really matters, right? Mm-hmm. How to work that ratio and having people write down what are the highest priority things, and then write down what is it you do during the day. And they can come up with a longer checklist of things that they do, but are they mattering? Or, where are they hitting the big buttons that really move the needle, as opposed to just getting that warm, fuzzy dopamine, check the list type thing. I love having those conversations because I know where it's going to go. Mm-hmm. And that aha moment, like, oh, that. And that's kind of what you just described, is you're now trying to prioritize where it really matters and how we're going to move the needle as a group.
Yeah. And I think also just part of the just shutting up a little bit is I'm getting to sit through meetings and observe a little more. And, coming out of, we have what's called a big line review season. So this is sort of the window when you're submitting and pitching a lot of products this year for placement next year. And I've got to watch everybody go through those with all of our clients. And sort of, it allows me, because I'm not in it, actively selling, I can observe some things. I'm like, I think we need to bring everybody in and have a conversation about this, because everybody is sort of running in their own path, and salespeople handle their clients and their merchants differently. And so sort of revisiting, coming back to that, because what's going to be a most effective 20%? It's being really effective in those meetings, getting those items presented in a positive way, in an effective way, identifying why Walmart should carry this on their shelf or on their site, like that matters a whole lot more than a lot of the other tasks that we're doing in our office. And so that's a perfect example of, I wrote out all the process. That's a sticky note that, like, we can't screw this up. We need to come together and spend time on this. And when you're young and new and starting out, you're just like, I got a meeting. You're just going. You're just trying to not get your face melted off on Monday because you screwed something up, right? Keep moving. Get the next thing. Make sure all the fires are put out, and just keep moving forward. And you never really pause and reflect. And we're sort of in the pause and reflect phase right now.
The next question I have is around dealing with a company that's the behemoth of Walmart. Is the mindset that you and your team have of dealing with a Walmart-sized company versus a different size company, would it be any different?
Well, I can speak mainly to the Walmart piece because that's been my primary retailer that I've worked with. I've called with a couple of other distributors and another specialty retailer. But I can really only think about Walmart. And I can also think about, it's really a two-way street, because I also have clients that are also businesses, So you're working with both of them. Walmart, they're so transparent. I mean, honestly, for the most part, what they're going to ask. From a supplier summit standpoint, they'll do these summits. And I work with smaller clients, so a lot of times we don't get invited. But I can already tell you what the agenda is going to be, right? I mean, if you're really listening to them, they're telling you exactly what to do, and it's relatively unchanged. Everyday low cost, everyday low price, providing solutions for their customers. And it's pretty straightforward. In recent years, you've layered on their emergence of e-commerce. So winning with e-commerce, if you're in my world, and you're not focused on that, then again, you're just not listening. So we just sort of translate that back in. There are nuances, right? I mean, Walmart is just so big, and they can really change the trajectory of an organization. When you get Walmart to say yes to your products, it can truly change. I mean, it can change your company. If you're privately owned, it can change your entire family. I mean, the whole thing can be so beneficial. It can also be, we call it the hug of death, right? If you don't know what you're getting into, and I don't say that as a slight to Walmart, it's just the realities of the big swings that they can take because of their size. If you're not ready for that financially, we talk about, there's nothing worse than you go sell in, products, and Walmart took a bet You took a bet. Everybody kind of said, let's go do this dance together. And it doesn't work because it happens. Well, now someone's got to clean that up. And that's a partnership too. So everyone gets excited to sell the product in, but then you got to kind of work together on financially. How do you adjust the strategy, through maybe that's price, maybe it's packaging, maybe you need to spend money to get merchandisers out. Well, when there's nearly 4,000 locations, that's a big expenditure for a lot of companies. And I tell you how many times I've seen smaller companies, they'll wonder like, what's an opening order for Walmart? And well, I'm going to make up a number because it's really irrelevant. Depends on the product and how it's configured. But let's say it's 20,000 units. And they're like, oh. And then they pause and like, oh crap. Because they now have to go buy the materials to build 20,000 units. They have to schedule it in a factory. Like it just kicks off a whole other process, So it goes from a really quick celebration to, oh my goodness, this is what this really means, And Walmart has case configuration requirements. They have specific ways that they need you to take care of them because they have a massively sophisticated supply chain. And there's not a lot of room for error, 1% errors are billions of dollars to them. So you just really have to get things dialed in and with the client. We spend so much time on the front end. It's before we ever even get to Walmart, we take a lot of pride in spending time with these clients and helping them understand the realities of what this is and understanding what their goals, right? Are you in a growth phase right now? Are you just wanting to go top line? That's one approach. If you're profit, maybe you're an existing company and you're just losing money. That's a different conversation. So really depends on the clients, but Walmart is always the gold standard. Everybody wants to get to, I shouldn't say everybody, most companies want to get to Walmart, And so it's really just our job to help them understand what that really means to get on shelf at Walmart.
Yeah. It's in my mind, I was envisioning like a safety harness, right? You're on your own here, but we've got you to make sure that you don't actually end up off in the ditch, right?
Yeah, and I think also just the way we measure success. In our company, we don't measure it for shipments. It's the sell through. I think you'll see that on one of our quotes somewhere on the website, or you don't celebrate till it goes through the register, because getting it sold in is a really major victory, but getting that customer to pull it through, I mean, that's when it gets really fun and exciting, and that's when you can celebrate. And I think your merchants are celebrating. Everyone gets to feel good of, we didn't just, put something on our shelves. We really found something that's delighting their customers, and that's the best part for everyone on my team. I know when we get to together on a Monday and we get to say, this item sold X number of units last week, that's when we celebrate.
I want to share a quick personal story that as you're sharing that, I was thinking of reflecting on my business before I got into coaching and exit planning. I had a catering business. And I was preaching to my team about, we need to get bigger orders, because we would get an order of 15 people, 30 people, 40 people. It was staying in that lane. And I'm like, we got to get big orders. We need to find the big fish where we can get like 100 or more people or something. These are the type. So that was me coaching my sales team on how to get bigger orders. And they said, hey, this is like a couple weeks later. This one girl came to me and said, hey, I got one of those big orders for tomorrow. I'm like, really? What is it? And like, well, it's a cookout for 330 people. And so you got to be careful what you ask for. You got to be prepared for what you're asking your team to do and you're trying to help people with. Or we pulled it off, but I didn't sleep.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's no joke. You got to be prepared for that surge of 20,000 units or whatever it is that they're trying to get to. They get over their skis. I know I said that phrase more than once now, but it's a big deal. It's real.
Yeah. And if you can execute and deliver, you could be setting yourself up for life-changing growth. With Walmart, it's really how high can you go? Because you're just not going to find a larger scale organization that can get behind you when it's winning and the customer wants your product. Get ready, because they're going to keep asking. They want to keep taking care of the customer.
So the people that are listening to this or watching it on YouTube, why would they want to get in touch with you? Who is your target person that might say, hey, I think I need to talk to this guy about what they do?
Yeah. So we tend to work with small to medium-sized suppliers that probably have an established business. This is not going from Etsy into a Walmart. And that's also for their benefit too. As all the whole story I just gave you is a reason why a lot of people don't want to go from a garage-based side hustle into Walmart. It can there's a lot of steps between there that you can take to build to that. So we tend to work with a lot of companies that are already in independent retailers, independent toy stores. They might be shipping to Amazon. They might already be at Target. They might be at different grocery chains. It just depends on that company's evolution and where they are. But they're already getting some traction, and there's kind of kept that eye on Walmart again. They're like, we really want to go there. That's the type of companies that reach out to us for the most part. We've had a few companies that we've had one right now. They're one of our best clients, and they'd been in Walmart for 15 years, and they just had sort of stalled out and needed a correction, and their business was not going in the right direction. And they reached out to us, and we were able to really get into the metrics, get into their scorecard and their KPIs, and be like, okay, well, here's 6 things I can tell you without even digging deeper that we need to fix. And so fortunately that you had a leadership, again, are you growth or are you profit-minded? That leader, she had the ability to say, I'm willing to stomach a little bit of this. I get it. I get that we're going to have to do some unpleasant things to right this ship. So let's go focus on growth, and we will work profit into it as we go along. That's on us. So that's another example of how we worked with a client.
You just described coaching. That's exactly what that is. That's awesome. If they want to reach out to you, what's the best way to find you? Search you on the internet? How do they find you?
Yeah. So for the most part, our website, pitchretailsales.com. Also, people find me on LinkedIn. I get a decent amount of messages on LinkedIn looking for representation. So yeah, Dustin Murphy. You can find me on LinkedIn and send me a message.
Thank you for being a guest on the show today.
Yeah, thank you.